Alright, so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at a pretty involved thing, and that involves routing and pathing of text. And especially with this particular font, it's got a lot of bits and bobs to it, and so that complicates the process even more. So it's one of the most complicated things in InkStitch that, quite frankly, I wish it did a better job of. Other computer programs for embroidery certainly do a better job, but they also cost money, where InkStitch is totally free. So because it's totally free, it's going to make us have to know more about it to make it do what we want it to do, but also it's going to take a little bit more time. Okay, so let me just show you how I've prepared myself for this arduous task that I'm totally not looking forward to. But if we understand the principles of what I'm about to explain, it actually isn't that big a deal. It really isn't, but it is going to take a little bit of time. So first of all, what I did here is I created a text layer, and within the text layer, I created sublayers. Okay, so you see here we have a text layer called support, event, and sharp, and that, of course, is our words. So within the sharp directory, I have even more layers. Letter S, H, A, R, P. So I create one layer for each letter. And the reason I do that is because, like, for our letter S, it consists of several pieces. Okay, and the same thing with our letter H. Look how many pieces it consists of. So we've got a lot of pieces in each one of these layers. So I feel like it's important to kind of plan it all out and set up your layers like I did. Okay, but let's take a look at the problem, and then we'll talk about solutions. So for our letter S here, okay, now I did do a little preliminary work, just a tiny bit. But for our letter S, let's look at how it stitches out. Okay, first of all, so we're going to go into simulator mode here. And when we take a look at it, that bottom piece is stitching, and then it comes up to the top, and then it comes down, right? And then you got that little piece there that stitches, okay? And if we look at our frogs, you can see we've got a jump stitch from here to there, which obviously that's not good, but then we have another jump stitch from here to here, okay? Now there's a reason that these things are happening to us. So, but at any rate, what we need to do is we need to ask InkStitch to route this in a better way. So when we're talking about our letter S here, we're talking about 4 pieces of this. Now, I purposely broke this satin column, purposely broke it right there, okay, because I want the connection to be at the closest point, always. Now, other programs actually have this function where the software will automatically make the connection at the closest point, but not in InkStitch. We have to do that manually. So you see here, we don't want the connection happening up here. We want the connection at its closest point. So that's why I broke it right there. Okay, so it's going to end right there and boop, jump over. Okay. So let's just kind of walk through how this is supposed to work. Okay, so the way we need this to work is we need half of this little guy. We need half of it. We need it to satin up to here, and then we need it to come over here to the top, and then we need to satin back this way, and then we're going to need a running stitch up here, over here, down here, through here, and this satin has to be the same way. Has to be split right in the middle, and then this has to satin down, this has to satin up, and then this has to satin. This is going to satin, 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 satin until it ends. And then we're going to have a running stitch up here. And then it's going to satin, 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 satin back to it to make that connection. Wow. And we have to do that for every letter, folks. Every letter has to be like that. Okay? So for our letter H, we need it to start here, but we need it to finish right here. Okay? And then we're going to make that little connection to our letter A. And our letter A is going to go crazy, right? And then it needs to end over here by the letter R, and so on and so forth. So you see that all of these, basically, all the letters on, except for this one. Okay, now this one's a little bit different. So here we will have it jump from here to here to finish off that letter. Okay. So this is a whole process. But like I said, once you kind of understand what the process is and what the expectations are, it's relatively easy to accomplish. Okay. So first things first, we've got these shapes. I need these to break right here in the middle. Okay. Now there is a function, and I might as well show you because I don't know. I don't work this way, but I might as well show you that it does exist just in case you do want to work this way. But you could come up to extensions and choose InkStitch and come down here to Tool Satin, and you'll see that there is a cut satin column option. Okay. So if I click on that, right, it's going to bring up this dialog box and says, hey, you can't do that, okay? And the reason you can't do that is because you've not attached the command. So the first step is to attach the command. So you come up here to extensions, InkStitch commands, and we need to attach commands to the selected objects, okay? And one of the options is we don't need a fill stitch starting. What we need to do is we need to cut our satin. So you see here it says satin cut point, used with cut satin column. So we want to choose that option and choose apply. Like I said, I don't personally like doing this, but you certainly can. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to move this guy right here. Let's go back into our regular view. Okay, we'll go to our selection tool, and we could drag this down where we want the cut to happen. Okay, so that's where we want the cut to happen, right there. Okay, now if you look at our layers palette, you could see that this is now kind of attached to this. Okay, so now we can go ahead, because we've attached that there, we can come up here to extensions. We could choose InkStitch, and like I said, I don't know, you may want to do it this way, but just choose the cut satin column. Okay, and now it has cut our satin column. So you can see here we have this piece and we have this piece. Okay, that's how you cut a satin column at a very specific point. Now, you know, remember I said I don't like to do that, so let's not do that, and I'll just show you what I do. So part of the reason why I don't like to do that is because, as you saw, it added rungs, which I'm a big proponent of no rungs. So it added rungs, and also it changed the line thickness. You know, that's not a huge deal, but you know, it is something it does. And so I just prefer not to do it that way. It's fairly easy to achieve the exact same result, and I think it's roughly just as quick. So what we're going to do here is double click on the object we want to split, and I'm going to double click to add a node, double click to add a node, and then you select both of those nodes. We use our keyboard shortcut of Shift B. Both of those nodes have now been selected at those same points, right? So now what we need to do is we need to we'll select that whole piece, and we're going to do Shift Control K. Okay, and now what that's actually done is it's breaking it out in 4 pieces. Now we know that when it comes to satin, we have to have those grouped. Okay, so now we're just going to combine Control K, and then over here we're going to do the same thing. Okay, we slice through those are selected, Control K. Okay, now what we could do is we go ahead and define our params. So we come up here to InkStitch, and we come down here to params, and we can go ahead and not choose running stitches, and you can see that we do in fact have our params here, and I do know I want to change those to 0.25. So it's a small piece, and when I'm doing small pieces, I like to increase the density just a little bit. Okay, so now there is some advantages and disadvantages to doing it this way. Like I said, it's really entirely up to you how you want to handle this. But I'm going to go back to, now this already has params applied, And so if I go into params here, you will see it is already a satin stitch, okay? And it does have the stitch density that I want, which is 0.25, excellent. So you can see it already is satin stitch, okay? If I come back in here to InkStitch, and we're gonna add the commands, and we're gonna do the, attach commands, and we're gonna do the satin command again, okay? The one benefit to doing that, now I'm not sure why, if that was just random that it selected right in the middle or what. But at any rate, the one plus that this does have, so now if I come back in here to InkStitch, now keep in mind that we can assign keyboard shortcuts to that cut thing. So we don't have to come into InkStitch params, tool Satin, and use that option. So we could apply a keyboard shortcut to this so we could do it a lot quicker. But if we choose cut satin column, the one thing that is nice about that is, number one, it does all that. It does all that. It does change the line thickness, so you can see that it does change that. But the one thing that is kind of nice is we don't have to go back in and reset our params for that piece. It is still a satin column. Like I said, I don't know how beneficial that is or not. You can see our zigzag is still 0.25, and it goes from, in this case, left to right. So like I said, I don't know how big a deal that is, but that's how it works, okay? So to me, I don't know. I'm kind of tore up in between. I don't know. Like I said, I just don't know how big a deal that is. So at any rate, the one thing that it doesn't do, in either case, it doesn't really have these stitching in the order we need. So let me explain what I'm talking about there. So we have two pieces here, okay? And so what we need is we need this to stitch from left to right, but we need this one to stitch from right to left. So let's go into params. I'm using my keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-P, right? So we need this to stitch. This is stitching from left to right. We need it to stitch from right to left. Okay, so we would just choose swap rails, and it should stitch in the opposite direction, and it does. Okay, now the other thing to point out here is you see that it's stitching where it ends down here. You can see it ends down here, and really, because the next object is over on this side, we would really prefer that to stitch over there. So I'm going to turn off the reverse rails, and let's just see what happens if we were to reverse our first rail. And now you can see that the stitching ends on the top side. Okay, that is like, to me, that's kind of craziness. Like, that we got to go through that whole process to get there. But we need this to do the exact same thing. So we need this to stitch from left to right. So we'll go into params. That's why I set that keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-P, because we go into params all the time. And you can see it's not stitching in the right order. So let's choose swap rails. Okay, now this is ending on top, and really that's not that critical on this particular piece. So we'll go ahead and hit apply and quit. Now for the next piece, we want that to stitch from right to left, but we want it to end at the bottom, right? So let's see how it stitches. It does stitch from right to left if memory serves. So that part's good, but we need to end on the bottom. And it is ending on the bottom. Yay! So there we go. So what it's going to do then it's going to pick up this piece. Okay, then it's going to pick up this piece, and then this piece. We're going to move on to this piece, and then, but we need this. You'll see here in a moment. We need this piece to come up to here and then stitch back down. So to achieve that, we're going to select the two pieces in question. So we select the top piece here, and we shift click on the bottom piece, okay? And then we're going to come up here. Now, I have a keyboard shortcut for this because it's something I use all the time. So you definitely want to set a keyboard shortcut for this. But we're going to come down here to Tool Stroke, and you can see mine is Control Alt and the letter J. And we do this, jump stitch to stroke. Okay, and we click on that. And we've got options here. I usually use this at 1, and it says do not connect after a trim or stop or force lock stitch. I think that's okay. So we'll go ahead and choose apply. Those settings are okay for the most part. I've never really seen an issue come up, right? So this is a big thick line that was just generated. So usually what I'll do is I'll back that off to 0.2. And all that is a jump from where the big piece ends and this piece begins. And if we double click on it, we can interact with it just like any other path. Okay, so there's nothing special about this. But what we have is a running stitch that's going to run up and then start stitching back down again. Okay, so that takes care of that piece. All right, so now the only thing that we really need is this is stitching top to bottom, and then it's coming over here and stitching back up. Okay, then it's going to go from here to our next piece. So let's come over here to our layers palette and just look at how this is actually stitching. So right now this piece stitches first and then that piece, and we need that to be opposite. So that stitches, then that, then you can see our bottom piece is stitching, but no, we need the top piece to stitch, then the bottom piece, then the big satin, then the little path, and then the little piece of satin. Wow. All right. So what we need to do though is from where this ends, we need a jump from where this begins. So I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut, Control Alt J, and hit apply. Okay. I don't like the fact that this doesn't disappear, but hey, you know what? That's okay. And then remember, we're going to change the width of our jump. And remember too, that we can interact with this the same way we would with any path. Okay, so we can come down here. Probably what I'll do is I'll add another node here. We've got our transformation handles here. And then I could go ahead and, you know, we don't have to, let me back up a couple steps here, because this probably would be easier for most of you. So when we have this, we could just come in here, add a node by double clicking, and then we could do straight line segments. So we don't have to mess with curves. So you can just add as many nodes as necessary to get around this bend, right? Then we're going to do the same thing up here. So we'll come up here. We can zoom in right there. And so this is coming up here. So what we have to do is move that. And we're going to have to do something like this. Okay, so now once we're here, now these little segments, we can curve if we want to. Don't have to, but we could. Okay, so you can see what's going to happen here. So when this finishes, it's going to do a running stitch all the way up here, all the way up here, and then go ahead and stitch. Now, this section to the big section is such a short distance that it's not going to register that as a jump stitch. So we don't have to manually enter that one. But the other ones we did. Okay, so now we have that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this in simulation mode. So we'll go take a look at the simulator here. Again, I use my keyboard shortcuts anytime I can. So let's back up here and just take a more specific look. So it's going to stitch our satin. And you can see we do have a little jump over to our next satin. But it's not technically a jump, right? And then it's going to do that walking stitch up top. Come across. Come across. Come down. Right? And then it's going to do that walking stitch up and finish off here. So you can see that walking stitch is not good. Okay, so we're going to have to change that. And the reason that's not good, just so you understand why that's happening there, is because in the document, we have it like on a curve, but in reality, the stitch length is too short, or too long rather. You know, that space, you know, it might be 2.5 millimeters or something for stitch length. And so we need to specify this as a different points. So it's a little bit complicated to explain, but we're getting close. We're getting close to what we want. But if I click on my frog here, you can see throughout the entire letter S, there are no thread trims. If I click on info here, no jumps, no trims, but we do have this issue. So, and like I said, that is because we kind of messed that up a little bit. Okay, we did. Honestly, we did. So this piece right here, that's the piece in question right there. So we'll go ahead and delete that node. We only had the one node that's specified, but now you can see we have this curve. And we're going to go ahead and make our line straight again. So we just have our start and end node, so we can hit Shift L. That's a very common thing. We clicked on that path and we hit Shift L. That's a very common thing that you really should put to memory, is that little keyboard shortcut. But you'll see here, if we use straight line segments visually in our document, okay, so now all that's hidden within that boundary. So now when we go and take a look at that, take a look at that in simulator mode, we should not see that be an issue. So it's going to start at the top here, stitch, 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 come around. It's coming up here and then stitching to there. Now, we still have an issue right there. You see that right there? And I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, what's causing that, but that's definitely still an issue right there, because, and we have an issue here where that is not being hidden. So be mindful of that. Understand that those things could happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here. We need to select that piece again, and we're just going to have to give it some different params because it's not liking what it currently is. Okay, so probably the easiest thing to do there is just switch it to manual stitch. Now you don't have to do this quite often, but sometimes you do. So we're going to click that to manual stitch, and you'll see what the difference is. And what it's going to do, it's not going to stitch that line based on a parameter of a certain stitch length. So in this case, it's going, because we set it to manual, it's going to set the whatever points we used in our, that's where the needle points are going to go. So right here, let me make this point. Needle point, needle point, needle point, needle point, needle point, needle point. Exactly where we told it to be. Okay. So let's look at it again. I know there's a lot of rules here, folks, but we're gonna get through them. But you'll see how it stitches differently. You know, that's the big thing. At the end of the day, we're gonna get the results that we want, and that's what's important here. And you'll see here, that turned out a little bit better, but you can see here we've got a couple of points right there. I don't know why it's doing that. I'll be honest. Let's look at our needle points here. That's not a very good view, is it? We've got a lot of needle points there. We're gonna have to take a look at the params of that thing again, man. I don't know what's going on here exactly. So let's take a look at the params. So we have our needle points specified. That's what we should be getting, but we're not. So let's look at our params again. Devil's in the details. We're gonna have to change our stitch length. see, when we're using, that's kind of interesting. When we're using manual stitch, we cannot specify the it should just, it should just, for our needle points, it should use the needle points exactly how we specified. But so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, let me look at it one more time in simulator mode and find out what's happening here for us. So let's go back into simulation. It's good that these little things come up because we got a lot of letters to go. So what is happening here? Let me pause this for a moment because I want it right there. I want to look at the needle points right there. So it is only using the needle points that we specified, and it looks like they are in the right spot. Because when you look at the other needle points, those are covered up. So what I'm saying is I know what our problem is. I was looking at the wrong path. So I think this is our problem. That little running stitch that we made, that's our problem, not what we converted to manual stitches. I think it's the other one. So let's turn that off for a second and let's watch. It is our other one. See? Where we specify the manual stitches, that's all hidden. This is a problem because of the length of the stitches. So that's why this is becoming an issue. So, see, devil's in the details. I'm glad we caught that. All right, so this is where our problem is because of the length of our stitches, okay? So what we can do here is we'll just go ahead and, we probably could have just converted this to a manual stitch and then it wouldn't even matter. But now we can, and I think that's what we'll do. We'll just go ahead and give that a param for manual. That column right there, that little satin piece is not very wide. It's very narrow. Okay, so that's something else to think about. So you can see how kind of blocky this all is, and that is because of our stitch length. So you can see here, so it would be less blocky if I change my stitch length. So let's say our running stitch length is 1.5. See how much more curved that is? So we'll go ahead and leave it at 2.5. Well, actually, it doesn't really matter because we're going to switch over to manual. And so now you'll see it's more faceted. But it's kind of a catch-22 because now these long pieces will become one piece of thread. So, you may not actually want that. So in that situation, so we converted this to manual, we would just come in here, and so at every one of these points would become a needle point. Okay, so we don't actually need probably that many needle points anyhow, but it does need to be hidden. But then these longer sections, we'll just add an extra needle point, and so now that all is going to look correct. So let's just take one more gander at it. You'll see, cycling through here, all that's covered up, but this is a very narrow satin column. Okay, this is a very narrow satin column, so that's why we got to just be a little bit mindful of those issues. But otherwise, yeah, that should stitch out very nice. So the letter S is done, and all that work that we did is all contained. Let's go into that layer. It's all contained in there. Okay, so the first piece of our satin, our second piece of our satin, and then the path that's running up to the top, and then the top piece of our satin, the other piece of our top satin, and then the big piece of satin coming down, coming down, coming down, path, right, and so forth. Okay, so there you go. There's letter S. Now, sometimes what I like to do when I am done with something, just get it out of our way. Okay, I don't need to look at S no more. Now I'm focusing on H. So how does H need to run? We know H needs to connect down here. Okay, but is that the first piece that's stitching? Well, I can't answer that right at the moment. I got to think about this. Okay, so it's really important what do we want on top of what? I know for sure I want these two columns on top of my horizontal. And the other pieces I want on top of my columns. Okay? Doesn't necessarily have to stitch that way, but let's just assume that that's how I want it to stitch. How would we make it do that? So I think the way we would make it do that, let's just think this through a second, okay? So don't worry about where it connects right now. Out of all of this, what piece is in the back? Well, this horizontal piece is in the back. So I need that to stitch first, okay? And then what's the next piece I need to stitch? Well, well, let's think about this now. Because this is where our thinking cap has to come on. Is how is all this going to connect? So I originally thought, well, we'll stitch this first, and then it'll end over here. Okay, so just kind of thinking this through here. So we'll stitch this first. It'll end over here. It'll come up. It'll stitch this piece. Then it's going to come down and stitch this piece. Then it's going to stitch this piece, and then it's going to connect over here. Okay, and then it's going to run up, stitch this piece coming down. Then it's going to stitch this piece, and then it's going to end right over here. That's how we want it to work. Now, what do we have to do to get there? So this piece is going to stitch first, then this piece is going to stitch second, right up top here. So we'll move that into second position. Then this guy right here, it's already in third position. Then this one right here is first, but we don't want it to be first. What is that? What Ricky Bobby said? So this piece right here, okay, this piece is letter H, but it wasn't in that layer. So there we go. It was out there in no man's land. So that's piece for number 1, piece number 2, piece number 3, piece number 4, and then this has to be piece number 5. Okay? So that has to be piece number 5. And then, no, I'm sorry. That is our last piece. So that does have to be our next piece. Then that one, because we're going to connect over here. Whew. Okay? So, clear as mud? So we know what our first piece is. It's this piece right here. And what it needs to do is it needs to have a path basically running down here, up here, all the way over here, because it's going to stitch starting on this side. So let me just show you what we're going to do. We're going to create a path. So we're going to grab our pen tool. Okay. All the way out to here. Step 1. So we could see there that we do have that path, and it's going to come right down here because our path is going to be the very first thing that stitches. So when it connects, it's going to stitch right there. Okay. So far so good, right? Now we're going to hold. Now this is a really good little trick for you. So you see it's already a dashed line, which is really important because that's how InkStitch sees running stitches. So therefore we don't have to go into params and specify anything special for this, but it needs to be the same color as the rest of it, right? So if we hold our shift key down and then hit the D key on our keyboard for a dropper, we hit the D key on our for a dropper, and then we click on that, and you can see that changes that. So let's go back, and so you really understand what's happening here. So we're going to select the shape that we want to modify. Then we hit the D key on our keyboard. That gives us our eyedropper tool. And then if I hold my Shift key down, it will change the stroke color from that red to that gray. Okay? If we don't hold the Shift key down, it changes fill color. But we don't want fill color. We just need a stroke. All right, so there we go. So now we have that first connection. It's going to come up and stitch this piece. But we need that piece to stitch essentially from right to left. I don't know how it stitches. So let's go look. So we'll go into Params. And we want to make sure that it's stitching from the top down. You can see it's kind of stitching from the bottom up. So we'll swap those rails. And now you can see when we did that, something kind of funky happened there that we don't really like. It did not do that going the other way, but it definitely does coming back at us. Okay, and that is not the software, that is us. And let me show you. So anytime something funky like that's happening with stitch angles, it's because of this issue right here. Okay, so you see here, it's got a lot of nodes, and something's amiss here. And sometimes, let me zoom in tight here, sometimes we can see the problem, and sometimes we can't. So sometimes there's a node on top of a node that we don't even know. Okay, I don't necessarily see that as a problem, but it could be. So let's go ahead and let's delete this one and this one. Any nodes we don't really need, it's best to, when we're creating our lettering, to not have. Okay, so we don't need all those nodes. That's all we need. But look at here, look at here, look at here. There is something happening right there, and it's telling us, look at me, look at me. And that's what it is. So, and what that is probably telling us is that there's a node on top of a node. Otherwise, they'd look just like all these. But this one's saying, there's something going on here. So let's just look at it. Let's pull it away. And it's not what I thought it was. So it's not a node on top of a node. I don't believe. So that's good. But there is definitely something wrong, because if we select those, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that after all. All right, so let's just see if just by deleting and clearing out some of those nodes, if that took care of the problem. So back to params. Might have, might not have. And not sure why it lost our satin there. Why did it lose our satin? Not sure. But now you can see that it's really a mess. So that's not good. So let me look at it. There's something wrong with this piece. I don't know what it is just yet, but we're gonna look at it in more detail. There it is. We have a rogue node. See that? See that? That's what I was looking for earlier. So we do have a node on top of a node. So I pulled that one away, and I pulled that one away, and we can't have that. Okay. So we'll just hit Control Alt and Delete. That got rid of one. So now we just have that one and that one. That will fix our problem. Okay. Back to params. I know, devil's in the details, but it's important that we understand those details. Something's happening like that, there's good reason it's happening. Trust me. And you can see now we have nice, happy satins. So there we go. Now we know how to fix that. If we ever come across something like that, it's usually because of that issue. A node being on top of a node. It doesn't handle that well. All right. So this stitches comes out to here, right? And now, so our path, our connecting path stitches first, then our horizontal satin, and then we need a jump stitch from our satin to our next satin, okay? But we also need this piece. We're going to have to do something about this piece. So we're going to have to break this apart. No choice. Shift B to break those, and then Control K, Shift Control K, okay, and then we're going to select those, Control K, and then we're going to select these, and Control K, okay, and then we're going to take this, and we're going to Params, and we're going to specify that they are satin. And we're going to pay attention to how they stitch. This one's stitching from the outside or from the inside out, and then this one's stitching from this direction out. That could work. Could possibly not work. I don't know. So we have our running stitch, our horizontal satin to that piece there. Okay, I think that'll work. So let's go ahead and select both of those pieces. Control Alt J, right? I don't know why it's doing that. That's kind of weird. I don't know. It's just the screen was flashing there a little bit. It seemed kind of odd to me. All right, so go. So there's our path. And remember, I do like to use 0.2 there. I wish we could set that manually, but we can't. So we could just do that little boop, boop, up to there, right? And notice that it's connecting up top here, which is less than ideal. That running stitch is running up top there. So maybe we do go into params here. And I'm so sorry I make you do all this. But we'll reverse the rail. And now you see it's stitching. It's stitching from the outside in, which we can't have. So, but now you can see where it started. So we did reverse the rail, but we also chose swap rails, and you can see it's starting here instead. So let's back up here. So it is starting at the bottom and going to the top. And that's what we need. So let's go ahead and apply and quit. And I just to illustrate this point and hit this home a little bit better, we're going to select this piece, right? And we're selecting the next piece that stitches. Control Alt J, apply, and close. And what you're going to see here is you're going to see that this piece here, we'll go back to 0.2 again. Now look at where it's connecting. It's connecting at the bottom, where we need it to connect. Okay, so that's just a, kind of an interesting little point there. So that's going to connect, run up. It's going to hit that. It's going to finish. Where is this? Where is this going to finish? Ooh, let's take a look at that. I think I might have messed that up a little bit. Because we need this to finish on the inside. So yes, this was my mistake. So we do need it to come stitching from the inside. Okay, so that's fine. So what this means is that this running stitch has got to come up here. There we go. Okay. And then, so then this piece to this piece, let's see if it needs a running stitch. Control Alt J. If it needs one, it'll add one, and if it don't need one, then it won't add one. But we asked it to make a running stitch for anything that's less than a millimeter. Okay, let's go ahead and delete that for a second. And let's take a look at that parameter and see. So from here to here, let's go, we are going to do that jump stitch again, but we're going to change this to 2. So you can see here, convert jump stitches not shorter than 2 millimeters. So let's just see here. Because really 1 millimeter is quite tiny. Nope, it says that's more than 2 millimeters, so fine. Fine. It can be a jump stitch. So you can see it's going to finish down here, start over here. Excellent. In fact, I think I want to move the start point of that jump stitch right there. Okay. It's going to come in, then it's going to start stitching this, but I don't know if this finishes our starts from the top down. So basically it'd be left to right. Let's see. Nope, it doesn't. You can see it's going in the opposite direction, so we're going to swap the rails. It didn't do anything, but we've ran into that situation before, right? Where sometimes it doesn't do anything. So what do? We reverse both rails. Okay, now do notice that it's starting over here to the right. I don't know if that's a big concern or not. We're going to find out, but we'll go ahead and leave that there. And that's probably where we need to look at next, is this connection. So from where that finishes and where this starts, Control-Alt-J, is it more than 2 millimeters? We're going to find out, because if it is, it's going to create us a little jump stitch there. It didn't create nothing, so we don't need a jump stitch there, which I didn't think we did. But we're going to come down here, and where this ends, and is this, let's look at that. So we have this piece here, past 75, and then our next path is this whole thing. And is that okay? Yes, that's okay. We don't need to split this one, but we do need a jump stitch. But let's find out where this is stitching from. We need it to stitch from the bottom up. So what is the current param? It's from the top down, so we're going to swap our rails. Now it's going to stitch from the bottom up. So we want this stitching in the right direction before adding our jump stitch. So we are going to need a jump stitch here. It's going to probably be more than 2, I'm assuming. We'll find out. It did not need a jump stitch. Okay, well, that's good. So then this is our next piece. So this piece finishes, and this is our next piece, way up here. So so this piece here finishes, and then so the next piece in the stack is this one. Now this one, do we need it to be split? And the answer to that is we do. We do need it to be split. So we're just going to go ahead and double click, right? And then we're going to select them both, and Shift B, that will break those apart. And then we'll switch to our selection tool, and then we'll do Shift Control K. That will break those apart. And then we will select those two and Control K. And then we will select those two and Control K. I know this seems like a lot of work, and it is kind of, but then we will go ahead and set those params. So we need those to be satin, and then we need those to be 0.25, right? And notice how those are stitching. They're stitching from the bottom up. That one's okay, but then the other one stitching from the bottom up, and that's not okay. So what we have to do then is go in and modify the param here, and so we know we need to swap the rails and come down. It's got to come down, back down to the middle. It can't be way out here. All right, so that's taken care of. So now what we need to do is from here, right, to our next object, which is way up here, we need that to have a jump. So from here, our next object is our left side. So that's the bottom, that's the left. So we go from here all the way up here, Shift Control J, apply the jump. Okay, there's our jump. So we need to change its size to 0.2, and then we can route it how we need it. So just double click. We need this to come down here, and we can move this to here. Doesn't have to be right at the point there. And this can come up right up here. That is right at the point, so that's good. So that's gonna jump from this to our path, stitch, and then we know from this one, we know that we need to jump over. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. and it does give us a little jumpy jump. So then we could select that and do 0.2. Okay, and that's okay where it is. I might just move that point down. So it's going to come out here and then stitch back, right? And then it's going to start this. But we already know that there is no jump required between here and here. But let's just try it out anyhow. It should not create a jump for us there because the distance there is less than 2 millimeters. Ooh, it did. And the reason it did, look at here, it did create a big jump stitch for us. But the reason it did that is because this is not going stitching in the right direction. So we'll open up our params. Remember, I have my keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-P, as you should too. And so it is, swap rails is not working. So we'll reverse both rails. You can see it's starting up top here. So we'll choose Apply and Quit. And now we will double check between those two, Control-Alt-J. So you can see how keyboard shortcuts can really save us a lot of time. Because we don't have to go to the InkStitch Extensions, InkStitch, blah, blah, blah every time. But you can see it did not create a jump stitch for us because we didn't need one. So then it's going to finish our satin column. And then, let's go back to our layers here. So it is going to finish our satin column. And then we have our bottom piece to contend with. Okay? And so what it needs to do is once that is finished, it needs to stitch all of that. And so we need to look at the params and see what direction that's currently stitching. And it's currently stitching from the top down, of course. We need to stitch the opposite way, so we'll hit Apply and Quit. I want to go back into params just one more time real quick, just to make sure that I have the density set right there. The density, yes, I do, indeed. Should be 0.25 for those little bits. Okay, so there we go. So that's taken care of. I do want to go back over here and just double check this density too. As long as we're going in there and looking, helps if I use the right keyboard shortcut. It is not. See, I thought so. So 0.25. My bad. All right. So there we go. So that takes care of that. Now, you know one thing that's interesting about this is I changed the density setting, okay? But I did it on both of those. But the stitch direction is going two different ways. But when I clicked on Apply, I wonder if it changed this. Nope, it did not change the stitch direction. So you see how one stitching one way, one stitching the other. So it did not modify that. Well, that's good. That's why I was hopeful of that. All right, so we're almost there, folks. So we have this piece here. That is our running stitch on our connector. But now, do we need a jump stitch from here to here? That's the question. Don't know. Let's try it. It's going in the right direction now. And the answer is no. We do not need a running stitch between those two. Whew. So we are done with the letter H. My goodness. All right. So do we want to take a look at both of our pieces here and call it a night? And then I will continue on. But let's look at them. Let's look at all that stuff. Okay. So we have our S and our H all selected. So let's go into Simulator and pause. And let's revel at our beauty. So here we go. We're stitching. We've got that little jump happening. We've got the running stitch up to the top of our H. The other piece of our H, our satin, our bottom, the running stitch up to the top. Beautiful. We've got our other piece coming. Beautiful. Oh, look at that. There's a little, see that little jump right there? We may want to address that because I don't like a couple things here that we could address. You see how there's a bit of a gap in the stitches? So we may want to address that, but we may want to address this too. So you see how this one doesn't have the gap between the stitches, but look at the up here. This seems to have a little bit of a gap too. So let's see if we can't clean that up just a little bit. Okay. So you see here, these rails come way down where this one is a little bit up. Okay, so if we just bring it down, if we want to go in wireframe mode, we could see it a little bit more clearly where it needs to connect. Go just a skosh past. Okay, and then same thing up here. You can see just a little bit. I like to go just a tiny bit. Just a tiny little bit. Here is pretty good, but hey, we're in here modifying things. We can, I'm talking about, you know, just like a 1/2 millimeter or something. Here, we're almost over too far. That's perfect. Okay, so that's why that looked a little bit off. But remember, I said we might want to um, fix this little situation here. And I really think, yes, I think we could add a little just that little piece right there. Let's go back into wireframe mode there. And yes, so you'll see that jump stitch happen a little differently now. Let's go ahead and change the param of that though to manual stitches. So let's go ahead and make that a manual. And then you'll see those extra needle points there. Make it that little loop. So that's what we wanted. So now let's go back in and let's just select all those bits again. And I think that will get us. So let's go back into, I went into params. I didn't need to go into params, but that's okay. That'll work. It'll get us the same simulator basically. But you can see how much better that is. Let's back up there. And when we're in params, sometimes it doesn't show us our running stitches. You notice that? It doesn't show us any of our running stitches. So we actually have to go into simulator to pick up those running stitches. You can see there now we have our running stitches. It's just a weird little thing. But what's happening right there? Okay, so there's something amiss right here, and it has to do with our stacking order. So this finishes, and then we need our path, and then we need our top, which we do have it. So this finishes, then our path, and then our satin top. Let's look at the params there. I think I know what's happening. Devil's in the details. You could see here. No? Yes, this is stitching in the wrong direction. So you see that? So this is coming from the top, from here to there, and it needs to stitch in the opposite direction. Okay? So you see here, see how those little arrows are pointing in that direction? So we just need to come up here to path and choose reverse path. Now those are going in the opposite direction. Okay? So now, I'm glad that happened, because now you can see that too. So let's go in and look at simulator one time. Beautiful. So yes, now it's happening exactly the way I want to. So remember what I was saying, the plus and minus key to fast forward at one stitch at a time and really see how, so you see our satin column finishes on our H, and then it comes in, right, and does our running stitch to the outside and then caps it off. See that there? And if I look here, of course, you won't see any frogs. I go to the design info. You won't see any thread trims or nothing. So this is all going to stitch in just one one go, okay? And then what we would do is we would just come in and nip that little jump if we wanted to. What looks like a huge space on screen is going to be very, very tiny. So that's probably not even that big a deal, would hardly be noticeable. So that's literally 2 letters. So yes, so we would just continue on with that whole process for all of our lettering. Now here is a point to make. We have this letter done. Could we copy this down to this S? Sure, we could do that. So some of these letters we could copy. Once we have the R up here, we possibly could use it down here. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different is that this for so we're going to start here and we're going to come around, and so this is going to stitch backwards, right? So our start and end points might be a little bit different over here, but swapping rails and things like that, it's probably not that big a deal. But according to the experts, that's literally how we have to do this thing. It's bit by bit by bit by bit, it's a little bit. It is honestly a little bit daunting, but that's how it works. Okay, so should we do one more letter, and then we'll call it a night? Let's go ahead and do one more, just to really hit this all home. So now we have H done, right? So H is done, and S is done. Now I will point this out too. Okay, let's point this out real quick. Is this a pain in the ass? Yes, very much so, right? But if we were going to make a font, right, all of this information would be contained within that font. So we could just literally type it out, and then we wouldn't have to do this every single time. The only reason that we're doing this is because there wasn't a font already available that kind of matched up. And so we have to go through this process. But probably what I would do is, if I like this particular font, is I would go ahead and digitize the whole font one time, and then we wouldn't have to do this. We literally would not have to do this every time. So that's how I would probably handle it. But let's take a look. Okay, so how are we going to path our A? We know that we need to connect it from here, right? We know that. We know the connection needs to be happening here, but exactly how this is going to stitch out, well, I'll tell you. And you can we kind of learned from our H, right? Our A is kind of similar to our H. So we're going to do the horizontal piece first, right? And then we are going to come down and we're going to, this vertical piece needs to end up here. Okay, it needs to end up top. And we know we need to end over here, right? On the back part of our A over here. So what I would probably do is this. We're probably going to stitch this, and then we're going to come down here, and we're going to stitch this bottom piece, and then we're going to come up here and stitch this piece, right? Then we're going to come up to the top of here and stitch this piece, and then we're going to come over here and stitch this piece and connect to our R. Wowza. So what do we have to do to get there? Well, let's take a look. So first of all, letter A, that needs to be our first piece to stitch. So that's going to be our first step. Put these pieces in the order we want them to stitch. Now we looked at that function in InkStitch previously in another video, but let's look at it again. We know we want this piece. I'm holding my shift key down and I'm clicking this piece, then this piece, then this piece, then this piece, and then I'm coming into extensions, InkStitch, right? Then we're coming to edit, restack the objects in the order of what we just selected. So now we know that those are at least in the order that we want them to be in. So that's step one. Okay, so we know that this piece, it's going to stitch from the outside here over and then come down, right? We just saw that with our letter H. So we're going to grab our pen tool and we're going to click here and here and here and here. That becomes our running stitch. So that's the first object, just like it was with our letter H. Then it's going to do the horizontal piece, but we don't know what order that horizontal piece is stitching. So we got to take a look at params. We know it's set to satin. Uh-oh, InkScape has crashed. It will now close. Well, that's not good. And we're back. All right. Not a big deal. But we do need to go back into our params. Thankfully, InkScape did save all of our hard work. And you can see it's going in the opposite direction we need it to. So yeah, we'll put it come back at us here, and that takes care of that. Okay, so we have that running stitch up and over and through, and now we need that running stitch to come back down from where this ends to our next piece. But our next piece is this piece here. But what we do need to do is we needed to then run up to the top of this. No, we do need to stitch this next piece, but we have to have it split here in the middle. Okay, so remember what we did there before? So we just click, and we're going to select those nodes, and we're going to break those apart. Remember, our keyboard shortcut is Shift B. That breaks them apart. And then we're going to go Shift Control K. That breaks our paths apart. And then we're going to use our Alt key and select those and combine those. And then we need this piece and combine that, Control K. Excellent. So now this piece we want to stitch first. So first our running stitch, our horizontal satin, and then it says this piece, but no, we don't want that piece. We want this piece to stitch first, then this piece. But we need to check the params of both of those to make sure they are stitching in the order. This one needs to stitch basically from left to right. So it needs to start at the bottom, which it does. And it's not set to satin. So that's the first thing we need to do. And I like to do 0.25 satin when I look at that tiny pieces. Okay, so that one's now stitching right. And then we got to go set the param for this one. Same thing on the satin side of things. So we're not going to have that. So we are going to have that 0.25, but it needs to come from the other way. So it needs to come from the top down. Beautiful. So that is good. So that's happening correctly. So now what we need to do is we need to jump from here to there. So Control Alt J. It's going to give us our jump that we need. Okay. So there's our jump that we need. And we can kind of readjust here. Right there. So it's going to end where this ends. And then it's going to come down to here and start stitching. Okay, then it's going to come over here and start stitching from over there. But now what we want to do is make sure that that is set to, I like to have the stroke style set there to 0.2 on my jumps. And then what I need to do is I need to take this piece and see if it does require a jump. So we're using, what are we using? 2 millimeters. So we're going to see, looks like we're converting anything that's more than 3 millimeters. That's probably okay too. That's a very short space, so no, it didn't create us a path there, so it's saying we didn't need a jump there. Okay, so now it's going to finish here, and it's going to go up top, but we need this. We need this rail to end at a different spot here than it's currently ending. So we're just going to double click on that path and put a node there. And then we're going to double click on this path and put a node right there. And then we're going to delete this. So we don't need that one, that one, that one, or that one. But remember, I said I like to have them just barely overlapping. Remember that? I said just barely. Turn off snapping. That's kind of giving us some fits. There we go. Just barely. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to make sure how this is stitching. So to do that, we're going to go into Params. It needs to stitch from the bottom up. And it is not. And now it is. There we go. And yes, it's thin. It's 0.25 thickness. Beautiful. So now what we need is, number one, we need to verify that this is stitching from the top down. So we'll go into Params. Take a look at that. It's not. It's stitching from the bottom up. Still stitching from the bottom up. So we're not going to have reverse rails. We're going to reverse both. And now it's stitching from the bottom down. Excellent. So now when we make this connection, right? Shift Control J. And we should get a jump stitch there. I believe that's more than 3 millimeters. It is not. So I'm going to back that off. I'm going to back that off to 3 and see if that will, or 2 rather, and see if that matters. Ah, yes, that did the job. I guess 3 is just a bit too long there. So you can see here, it's jumping, right? So I'm going to double click here. There we go. So now we have our little running stitch up to the top, and it's going to come down and it's going to finish. We do need obviously to extend those a little bit, just a 0.5 millimeter or so to the inside. And then wherever this finishes, if this begins, let's see if it needs a jump. We'll go ahead and hit apply. It's 2 millimeters. We have our jump set at 2. And yes, it did need a jump, but look what's happening. So that's okay. So this is not stitching from left to right. So that's our first thing we got to fix. So swap rails, stitch in the other direction. And there we go. So now we'll do the same thing. See if it needs a jump. It did not create one for us, but I feel like we do actually need one. Remember, just like in the H, I felt like we needed one also. So, not a big deal. We're going to grab our pen tool, and we just want to make sure that we're going to come from here out to here. Okay, so we're going to just move that down, come over here, and that is already set to the proper width. And so now our letter A should now stitch out in the proper order. All right, so let's go ahead and we want to look at all of what we've got accomplished so far. So our S, our H, and our A, let's go ahead and look. We'll start with simulator. So you can see here, all of that is stitching nicely. Something's happening right here though. We don't like this. Something's happening right there. What's happening there? Don't know exactly what's happening there. There's definitely an issue there. And then what? We have a color change? Oh yeah, we had a little color change right there. Okay, no problem. So we do have an issue right there with our A and our color change problem. So let's address both of those things. So they're going to go in here. Remember, D for our dropper tool, and Shift and click. So that takes care of that. Now, this jump stitch here, we can just visually change that to 0.2. That'll help us clear that up. But what's happening down here? So down here, what is happening? It looks to me like, so first of all, we have our connection line. Okay. And then we have our horizontal satin, and then we have an issue here. And the issue here is our stitch length issue, right? So we got to go into params and change that to manual. So we want that to be manual. And now you'll see it'll make that corner, and we could just add an extra node, and now we know that that is all correct. So now let's take a look at it. So go back to simulator, we'll start there. So that is all stitching correctly now. Okay, I think I see why there's stitches on top of stitches. That's why it looks a little confusing. There, you see that jump stitch right there? That's happening. And I don't know about the stitch density over here, but let's look. So we have, clearly we have no jumps, no trims, and yeah, all that's looking pretty good. So one thing I do want to look at is this param right here. Make sure that that is 0.25. Okay. What is going on there? So that is the last piece that's stitched out. Maybe it was this one. Okay. I knew it was letter A, but maybe it was the second piece here. That's what the issue was. And yes, that is the correct satin density, so that is correct. So there we go. So all of that will work perfectly now. So we'll go ahead and turn off A, and we'll turn off H, and we'll turn off S. So at least now you can see we've got some work done. Now what we could do is, like I said, for the R, the P, those are already done on support, so we could take care of that. And then once we do one E, then we can copy over all of that for the other E's. So that's good. So we do RPE, and then this one will be done, this one will be done. We have to do V, the N, and the T, and then that R will be done. We'll have to do the O. The P's will be done. We'll have to do the U, and the S is already done. So we'll be able to copy all of those other pieces on over for the bottom, for the other letters. So once we do one letter, we can copy it over. A little bit of work ahead of us still, but eventually we'll get there. So that's the deep dive in routing and pathing, a more complicated font with lots of bits and pieces. So I hope you stuck it out, learned a little something. Thanks for watching.